know it's probably some people waiting on us. Good evening.
Good evening.
Figured I would be a little early.
Thank you.
Faces to names. All righty, so we got a few minutes before we actually start. So if anybody wants to go grab a drink, we're waiting for Corey and Alexander. To jump on here. I guess they would be here exactly at 6:30. And the rest of everyone to join. So we'll give everybody a few minutes to hang out. I do have a mini-me co-host, so if you hear a small voice in the background, that would be my co-host.
Everyone, this is Alex.
Hello, Alex. Thanks for joining.
Hi. Thanks for the invite.
I'll usually give everybody about 5 or so minutes after start time to kind of join. And plus Corey is not joined yet. So he said he had a presentation, maybe. So we'll see what happens. But I know it's dinner time, homework time. I have a little co-host of my own running around, so I'll give everybody a few more minutes.
Is that a furry co-host?
No, no. She is literally a genetic match. The other one is at football practice. It would be much louder. I think Corey just joined. I've made you two presenters. I usually just man the chat. If you guys have any questions, I'll answer what I can, or I will field them to our two guests, Alex Jones and Corey Fitz. If you guys want to come on screen, since it's the candidate meetup. If not, no worries. I usually disappear myself after a while. But welcome to our last candidate meetup of the year. For those of you who usually join the candidate meetup, it's usually a pretty good time. We have our industry professionals come in, give us a few tips about things that happen in the industry. We will have a question and answer session for this particular one. This is kind of like expectations of things for entry level positions, or pretty much I'll let Alex and Corey kind of take over. I put out a survey to kind of ask you guys what you wanted to hear or what you wanted to happen in the candidate meetups, but I didn't really get any answers. So I kind of just made one up on the fly. But since Alex and Corey are both in the industry, I kind of just was like, what would you guys want to know? Let's pick their brains and kind of find out, what they know. So at this time, I will let them take over. So introducing Alex Jones and Corey Fitz. So there you guys go.
Okay, I think Corey, I'll go first if that's all right. Maybe alphabetical order. My name is Alex Jones. I am currently the information security manager with a cybersecurity company called Cobalt. Cobalt does pen testing as a service, so we have pen testing services as well as Cobalt Platform, which is a web application and a platform for managing pen testing. A little bit of background about me: I've worked in regulated industries, PCI environments, Hudson's Bay Company, or heavily regulated environments at Cognizant, working on life sciences, clinical trials. I've also was a security engineer and built a security program at a company called Gainsight, which was another startup. So I've got a lot of experience, from compliance, cloud, information security, application security a little bit, and I'm happy to share some background. I'll let Corey do an introduction. But I didn't start out in security. I started out doing audio, video, media technology, and then got into cybersecurity full time in about 2012, 2013. So I'm happy to share, some background and some experiences I have, and I'm happy to be here with everyone. So thank you very much. And Corey, if you want to do an introduction. Oh, Corey, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Sorry about that. I'm having some issues. I got a new microphone, so lo and behold, with my luck, it's giving me problems today. But great. I'm Corey Phipps. Thank you guys for having me tonight. Interested and happy to be here. I've been in cybersecurity for about 5 years. I started my career in law enforcement. I worked in different positions as a detective and actually worked on the FBI Cybercrime Task Force And from there, I made the decision to get into cybersecurity. So I went and got my master's degree. I didn't know very much about IT. I was a special agent and a detective. I knew how to seize the evidence and brought it to the analyst, worked with them a little bit, but wasn't technical at all. So I took that journey and to be honest, I was very scared. I didn't know if I had the technical capabilities to do the job. Everyone else started and came up in IT. So it ended up working out great. Here I am 5 years later, and I'm the director of cybersecurity. So just kind of took some things that worked for me, and I'd be more than happy, to share them with you guys and answer any of your questions because, I've been where you're at and I know it's scary. So um, keep your heads up. It can be a long journey, but it's worth it, right? So again, just happy to be here. Happy to share any of my commercial experience. I also do some DoD security stuff for our organization. And, any questions you may have, I'll be happy to answer.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for participating in our candidate meetup. I think you all know me pretty much very well, Kiana Campbell, Level Up Coach for Cyber Up. And I will let you all get started.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think if I'll just kind of try to warm up the conversation a little bit here, and we can, of course, anybody wants to jump in, you can post questions maybe in the chat or just jump in. But similar to Corey, I did not. I was not always working full time in security. I spent about 10 years working as an audio engineer. I worked in a couple recording studios in St. Louis and did music production, recording, audio, video production. And one of my roles in the recording studio was like helping manage our network, managing an FTP server, doing client delivery, file delivery for clients, as well as managing some of our backups and things like that. So while I was, technically working in audio, I was still kind of touching IT systems and, dealing with clients day to day. And one thing that, that I really, this is something that is applicable really to any job. When I was working in the recording studio, my manager at the time, she always sent the most difficult clients to me because she knew that I would just figure it out. I'd figure out what the client needs, make sure that we're delivering, what the client needs. And those are the types of skills that are transferable, in IT and security. Even today, I'm dealing with customers, that have questions, customers that have issues, and being able to apply those, those foundational principles of, showing empathy, being a good listener, understanding, what are the requirements, what are the basics, what are your customers looking at, those are going to be transferable in IT and security as well. So, just to share some background, I decided to go back to school for cybersecurity in 2010, finished my bachelor's degree in 2013, and then got my first full-time security job with Hudson's Bay Company, a large retailer that had an office in St. Louis in 2013. And I was basically brought on as a junior compliance and security analyst. We did a lot of PCI auditing. We had a big credit card environment. And I had some challenges, when I was finishing my bachelor's degree, when I was applying to different jobs, I would have a lot of people say, I see you have some technology experience, but it doesn't say, security analyst, or it doesn't say IT analyst. My boss that hired me at HBC, he knew I had the communication skills. I had the customer service skills. I had the communication skills. And he said, we need these skills in security too. So we want to bring you into our team and help you build our compliance and security programs. And I built one of their first security awareness programs. I was involved with the PCI audit. So, even if you're new into cybersecurity, if you have some tech skills already, I like to share my story to say that, I didn't always do security. I was doing more creative work and then have applied some of those principles in the cybersecurity world. So, just wanted to kind of share for what it's worth, share a little bit of background about me and my story. So I'm curious if Corey, if you have anything to add. I know you, going from law enforcement to cyber is a little bit different, but, similar, the paths aren't always just linear, sometimes our paths wind a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, great. Thank you for that introduction. But yeah, it's similar kind of styles, and I've experienced a lot of the same types of things. Again, started coming from law enforcement. I started as an engineer. I actually lucked out. had a bunch of interviews, and you guys will go through that, and honestly, they get frustrating, and it just I found myself getting very discouraged because I would get asked these questions that just made no sense to me. It was like it was like a giant game of stump the chump, and it was just week after week, interview after interview, and finally I just realized, hey, it's just part of the game, and you got to play it. So I started talking to people that were in the industry, and they told me the same thing. Yeah, it's just what happens, right? So it's just all about finding the right person, making connections on LinkedIn. So I started, just again reaching out to people. Hey, I really want to get into the industry, and a few people just helped me out, and got a few interviews, the right place at the right time, and a guy took a shot on me and said, "Hey, you're not an engineer, but that's the only position I have open, right?" So it's a senior engineer position, and I'm like, "Oh, great. That sounds like it's easy to mess up." But it was challenging. It was hard. I'm not gonna lie and say it was easy, but after about 6 months, I felt pretty confident in what I was doing, and I just learned so much. And I worked with a guy that he was just great. I mean, at the time, I didn't like it because every time I asked him a question, he wouldn't answer me. He'd tell me to figure it out myself. Now, if it was something that was pressing and needed to be figured out right then and there, he'd help me. But looking back now, that was probably the most kind of defining moment in my career because I had to learn how to do things on my own, and it was scary. But again, 5 years later, I'm the director of cybersecurity, and that is exactly why, because it's not rocket science. You're going to work with a lot of guys and girls and people of all different kinds of backgrounds that have come up through IT, started at the help desk and worked up. And I don't know if what everyone's background is here. Maybe some of you have come up through IT, some of you not, but don't be discouraged because I didn't. And it actually gives you a leg up in certain areas because you don't have a lot of those bad habits. You don't have a lot of those preconceptions, expectations of certain things, and you literally can just think outside the box. And when you solve problems, you're not the internet police, and that's the hardest thing for someone new in security. I got analysts on our SOC team all the time that they'll find people visiting websites that they're not supposed to. And I always go back to them and say, look, that's great. You guys are doing some great work, but keep in mind, is that a security event? Is somebody that's unauthorized to be on the network accessing that site? Well, no, it's an employee of the company. Okay, great. So let's walk through the thought process. We got to separate them out. So yes, it's an unauthorized, use of the internet, but it's not necessarily a security issue. So that's more of a governance issue. So we want to pass that back to where it belongs, and then let's go and look for security incidents. And when you're able to separate things like that, people aren't going to constantly lean on security team to enforce those governance decisions because they need to be separate. Because when you're working a security incident and you really need to talk to somebody, you don't want that intimidation. You don't want them to see that separation. You want them to know, hey, I'm here to help you. We're not only here to catch people on the network doing things they're not supposed to. We're here to keep you safe. And that's our part of what we do. Everyone has a part in their job, and they do a lot of great things for the company. And that's just what we do for the company. And, you'll get that. You'll find your groove and you'll find what you like. You might not get the first job. It's probably not going to be exactly what you envision doing, but just be patient and, do good work, and good things will come, because it's like I tell people, don't ever settle. If you're not just happy with what you do every day, there's a 0% unemployment rate in cybersecurity for a reason. There's a job out there that, is for you. So just be patient and don't settle, and, just have fun with what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. I agree, and I think that a couple points you mentioned that I want to reiterate too is I'm working with a whole variety of technical people and non-technical people, and really there's such a real need for the technical security side, but as Corey said, just the compliance and governance, you don't really have to be super technical to step into, doing compliance and governance work. And that's something that I was able to kind of ramp up, some of my entry level jobs where, I may not understand how to, decompose a architecture diagram, to do like an advanced, threat model or something like that. But being able to do something like working with your people team, like let's say you have HR teams and your people teams, and you have compliance controls that say, you must do a background check and a criminal check, and then, your employees must sign a handbook. when they were onboarded, that's not super technical, but HR teams still need coaching on, okay, what do we need to do to meet these compliance controls? You don't have to be able to, script in Python or do advanced, security work to be able to say, hey, I understand there's a control that says, thou shalt do this. And then our HR team is kind of scratching their heads like, well, we kind of know this, but, it doesn't take a lot of technical wizardry to be able to, coach teams on compliance programs and things like that. And that's something that I learned a lot of this just like by just kind of, as I mentioned, I started at Hudson's Bay Company and we went through a large PCI audit. I had never done a PCI audit in my life, never worked in a large retail environment. So it was a learning experience for me. And, we were constantly having to follow up with our teams and say, okay, the PCI requirement is this, we're kind of doing this. So maybe we need to make some improvements and make sure that we're, looking at this area, or is there something we're missing? So that's something that people from a whole variety of backgrounds, I'm coaching, like I said, some people in our HR teams on doing self-assessment work for compliance work. So, as Corey said, it's a lot of just, being persistent, having that real desire to learn and contribute. Security professionals, we're lifetime learners. I'm doing some self-study, doing some boot camps, reading some books, following some podcasts and just kind of learning on my own as well. And, people that are in the security field, you have to be able to adapt and you have to be able to learn quickly. And, really the foundational principle, and this goes back to, my schooling in engineering, engineering is like, you take what you know, you apply it to what you don't know. And as Corey said, figure it out. You're going to have to, maybe do some Googling, do some research and some self-study, but you definitely want to lean in, and stay positive and be persistent. I mean, I was in the same situation, job hunting, entry level. I'm over on the Illinois side. I'm close to Scott Air Force Base. I probably applied to 300 Air Force jobs, contractor jobs. I didn't have my degree yet. I didn't have the certifications, and I didn't have a DoD clearance. So people were like, sorry, like maybe if you finish your degree, get a clearance and come back, maybe we'll talk. And I just kept applying and then, got my foot in the door, made an impact with my manager that hired me at HPC. And he saw something in me. He said, this kid doesn't know everything, but he's hungry. He wants to work, he wants to learn. He's got the tech background from media. So he's gonna figure this stuff out, and so be persistent and, keep pushing out your resumes. And then just kind of one final point, as Corey was saying, definitely network with people as much as you can. There's always the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Leveraging resources like CyberUp and building a network is going to help you a lot. I mean, I have people that I've worked with that are lifelong champions. Like, I know people that are like, I would work with you at any job, and I have people that have told me the same thing. Like, anywhere you go, like, I would always want to work with you. So as you get your experience and you get your foot in the door, build those relationships, and then you can leverage those relationships. And it's a little bit of a bump, to try to get your foot in the door, but you want to want to stay persistent, and make sure you keep pushing, keep networking, keep applying, and then the opportunities will hopefully open up for you, and you'll be able to jump on those when you're ready. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions or anything. Everybody's been pretty quiet, so I hope you guys have some questions for us. I'm going to go on mute here and grab a drink here while we'll pause for a minute. Sorry, go ahead.
I do have a question. Just from maybe not an interviewee, actually from an interviewee and an interviewer standpoint, because I've heard all the questions from interviewers and interviewees, but you get the what's your strengths, what's your weaknesses, what are your just a standard interview, but from a technical interview standpoint, what are some technical interview questions that we may get in this industry that we may not get in a standard interview? Because this clearly is not a standard interview situation. So, because I've been in some situations that are not standard, and I've been asked some pretty technical interviews, and I've been stuck with the technical questions, and I've been like, I don't know. And I've literally lost some jobs because I can't answer those technical questions because I had no idea how to answer them.
That's a great
Yeah,
question. I deal with that all the time, and I don't know about you, Alex, but I would say I probably interview in 10 to 20 people a month, and as the director, I like to be in on the entry level interviews just for that reason because it's again I go back to my interview experience, and I did not like that. I would come away, and it would make me feel worse, and I don't. I tell people flat out in the interviews, I say, look, there's going to be some questions that you're not going to know. Hopefully, if there's not, good for you, but what I'm trying to do is put you in a position to where you don't know the answer to something. So I can gauge your thought process because as a security analyst, that's what it's all about is putting pieces of the puzzle together. So, I would tell people that up front, hey, there's going to be some challenging questions, and I'm not putting you in the position to make you feel bad. I'm just doing it because I want to know, and then I'll feed them the answer is if you don't know something, the most important thing in security is one, admit that because there's two types of people that don't know and people that don't know but act like they do. And I can tell you the latter is the worst kind to be because as you're starting out, you'll see those type of people. And what happens is they won't admit that they don't know something because they feel like, oh, it's going to make me look worse. Well, what happens? People assume that they do know, but they're just not very good at what they do. So I can work with somebody that's learning and new and excited, and that's fine. That happens. But when someone acts like they know something that they don't, then you get into that second category, and that's where it becomes a problem. So when you're dealing with those situations, I've dealt with them. It's personalities, right? So some people just maybe not be very good at interviewing, and they don't realize entry level position is an entry level position. It's not so much what you know today. When someone hires you, they're investing in you. It's where are you going to be in a year from now? You hire someone with 10 years experience. Hey, I know where they're going to be in 10 years, right? You hire someone that's less than a year, you have no idea. That's an investment. And to me, that's an investment I'd make every day of the week, for somebody that, it can have a good thought process, figure stuff out.
yeah, I agree 100%, Corey, and that's something that I mean I'll share, share with the group here. One technical question I ask in every interview, so I'll save that for next. But I think a very important point there is, you have to be able to say if you really are not sure and you're not confident in something, you have to be able to say, I don't know that right now. Um, Give me 24 hours. I'm going to go do some research. I'm going to read a white paper. I'm going to Google it, look some things up, and then I'll come with an answer. And I know that it's hard to do that when you're in an interview format because you can't say, hey, we'll meet tomorrow because we just have an hour for our interview. I was in a very, very challenging interview with a very, very sharp architect when I was getting hired at Cognizant. And this guy, he was personally directed by the CISO to be like the person to push buttons and show people if people are okay to say, I don't know, and if people are just trying to pull out BS. And this guy was like an AppSec database expert, like super, super sharp. And we were talking about some database security stuff, and he was like, okay, well, what about this? And what about this? And I was like, well, the database, like, there's if it's multi-tenant, then you maybe have some field level encryption and some different types. And he was like, well, what about this and this? And I could tell that he was really just trying to push my buttons. And I finally had to say, I mean, I don't know specifically, I know what you're trying to do. And I'm going to say, I don't know, because you're just trying to kind of push me to that point where I just pull something out that I know is going to sound not good. So I said, I'm going to just say, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about database security up to this point, but this particular thing you're asking me, I'm not 100% sure. So I don't know. And I'll be honest, I could do some research and look into it. And he said, okay, that's cool. I was purposefully trying to push your buttons and see kind of where that point is. But being able to confidently admit and say, I haven't really spent a lot of time on that. I haven't read up on that. Maybe I haven't done any schoolwork on that, so I don't really know. But, if you really need an answer on this, I can work on this for, give me 24 hours and I'll do some research and I'll come with a recommendation. And that's something that my leadership is always asking for too. They're like, if you don't know, say you don't know, and say, I'm going to do a little bit of homework. And that's one of the things about security is that nobody knows everything. You can't know everything because there's just so much stuff going on. So we have to be able to admit, okay, I need to do some self-study. I need to level up and kind of learn more in this area. and then come with recommendations. And I mean, even my security leadership, they say, hey, we saw something that's unique or different. What's your opinion on this? Can you help me maybe write a response or just, do some analysis on this? So, that's just kind of sharing some of my feedback. And then one more point I wanted to make, and this is a little bit more focused and going back to the original question. One question that I ask in every interview, and I'll put this in the chat here so you guys can take some notes if you'd like. There's two methods for data protection, and they're very distinct methods, and it's very foundational for security professionals to be able to understand the difference. So every interview that I have, I ask somebody, tell me the difference between encryption and hashing. There are two methods for data protection, and if you're a security professional and you can't articulate, one is reversible, one is non-reversible. One is for integrity and the other is for data protection. One would be used to hash a password and store a hash value. Encryption would be used to encrypt data in transit over a network. Understand the basics of hashing versus encryption. And that's something, just free tip to everybody. I ask that on every interview. And that immediately gives me, if somebody is like, I don't really understand hashing, even just understanding the different use cases in data protection. If we're taking a password in our application, we want to hash that and store that hash value. If we have sensitive data we're traversing over a network, we want to encrypt that data because it has to be reversible. So that's just just a technical tip, and I'll put it in the chat here so you can add it to your notes. But I ask that in every interview. What's the difference, hashing versus encryption? And tell me what you think about these.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, thinking back when you said that, Alex, it made me think of something. So the most common question, I don't know about you, Alex, but any security person on our team gets asked is about data security, about privacy, about when you should protect data. And if you trace that back, it goes right back to encryption. So if you understand encryption and understand how data is stored, and you don't ever lose track of the fact that the golden egg in security is data. So many people lose track of that and they start focusing on, protecting the all kinds of other stuff, but never forget it's all about the data. If you understand how that's protected and encrypted, you'll be able to, answer those questions correctly. Because again, you don't ever want to be wrong on a data is it data, is it secure, personal information, those kind of regulation requirements. You got to be spot on when you answer those, or at least say, hey, let me get you to someone that can help.
Yeah, and Corey, that's a great point too. And that's in every day and every assessment that I do, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a project with my teams, people come to me, hey, we need you to approve this. Are we okay to do this in our application? Are we okay to, bring in a vendor, do this integration? My first question is, what's the data? Because if it's public data, I'm like, do whatever, have a ball. If it's public data, I don't have time, to worry about public data. If it's regulated data, if it's sensitive data, if it's my customer's vulnerability data, then that's a whole different series of, so that's a question that I ask probably 10 times a day. And that's so important too when you're interviewing with people. Think about, what is that data? If it's regulated data, you're going to have different data protections than if it's public data. Security teams are busy enough that we don't really have a lot of time to just say, hey, we're going to go crazy on public data. If it's supposed to be public, it's there. Like, we have enough work to do with regulated and sensitive data.
So it looks like we're getting a lot of questions. I don't know, Alex, we're going to maybe catch them up. So clearances.
Yeah.
So we deal a lot with clearances, in Uncommon where I work, and those are not easy to get, but they're not hard to get either. So if you want a job that requires a clearance, either companies are going to take two approaches. One, they're going to get you one. They're going to sponsor you for one, and they're going to get it for you. Or two, they're going to hope you're coming right out of the military and already have a clearance. They get reimbursed for that clearance expense. So it's really not costing them anything up front. They have to do the It's a timely process. But for instance, I never had my clearance, outside of law enforcement, and I always worked commercial. So when I started having to have meetings like with CISOs on government organizations, I couldn't get in, a lot of the intelligence, organization buildings without top secret. So started going through that process. It's pretty fast. So, I filled out all the paperwork. That probably took me a day and a half, maybe, because I don't know, the older you are and the more places you live, the more answers you have to put on there. but they run it through and you'll almost immediately within a day get your interim secret clearance, which is good enough to get in, the lobby of the NGA, right? But it's not a top secret. That they have to go through the interview, and man, they talk to your neighbors, they talk to all kinds of people. But I can tell you the rejection rate's only 1%, right? So don't lie to them because they're going to figure it out. And then you're just going to have to explain it, and they're going to have to take 10 pages to write down why you left something out, and it's not going to matter anyway. Only 1% of people get rejected. So you're not just be overly honest, but only answer the questions they ask. But yeah, you'll get that secret right away, as long as everything comes back. And then you'll just have to wait the 2-3 months, whatever it is, for top secret. If it requires SCI, you might have to do a polygraph. But they'll tell you all that up front. But they'll get you that. It's nothing you have to pay for or anything like that. If they need to hire people, and let's be honest, if they're hiring somebody that needs one day one, it's probably somebody that has to have done something before working in the government that would have one anyway. Most of the positions won't require that. You can have an interim.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Corey. Yeah. And I don't actually have a clearance, and that was a blocker for me when I was applying, to jobs at Scott. But like you said, the companies, you can't just be an individual and say, hey, I want to, I want to request a clearance. It has to go through that sponsorship process with the company. I haven't really been through that firsthand. I've been in the private sector, for the last 10 years. But yeah, that's very good tips, Corey. Yeah, let me see here. So how
Well,
do
how
we
do you
get
poll applications? That's a good question too. It's a lot of times TA. I don't know about you, Alex, but our talent acquisition team will pull everyone out and they'll pre-screen them on phone interviews. But I still have access to the applicants. So again, there's literally, I think it's a zero or even a negative unemployment rate right now in security. But that doesn't. I mean, that's not regionally. There's a lot of virtual jobs, right? But let's just be honest. The chances of you getting a job right when you have your security plus are going to be pretty good. So it's definitely a candidate market right now. But again, just looking for those out of the box skills. I mean, again, coming from law enforcement, I had a certain set of skills that were unique, right, to someone with that experience. And, I combine that to what I do now. And I'm constantly, I had a podcast with Tony, and I told him I'm constantly looking for people that can think outside the box. Because again, you get someone with 20 years experience, nothing against that person, and they could be great, but it's not necessarily a leg up because again, it's where they're going to be in 20 years, and nothing in security right now is the same as it was 20 years ago. I say that all the time. Nothing's the same 10 years ago. So experience from 10 years ago speaks to a process and speaks to a thought, some decision making. But let's be honest, is the technology the same? No.
Yeah, absolutely, Corey. Yeah, and I think I have several roles that I've been hiring on my team, and also interviewing with some teams that I work with, some close stakeholders. And one of my roles in particular was a little bit more challenging, in particular because the company that I work for, we have a U.S. entity, we have a German entity. Due to some of the laws, I'm by no means a legal expert on German labor laws, which are a little convoluted. I'm trying to learn them a little bit, but we have some restrictions where we have to hire somebody that is on German soil. So we're looking at sponsoring people to either come from other countries into Germany, or really I was narrowing my focus on Berlin, because I have a large engineering team, about 40 developers, 50 developers, infrastructure engineering. Some of our engineering leadership is in Berlin. So that kind of made a very smaller candidate pool, just to say, okay, the backfill and the role that I have is for a security operations engineer. So they need to have some experience with, either Splunk, Sumo Logic, QRadar, some kind of a SIM tool for aggregating logs and doing security operations. So trying to find, okay, there's some people in Germany that have this experience, but now if I'm looking at, because we have the office in Berlin and we want somebody to be able to go work directly with our teams in our office, okay, now we have an even smaller candidate pool for Berlin. So that was a little bit restrictive, and I had to go through and filter through, 20 resumes. It was like somebody in Singapore and somebody in Dubai, and I said, okay, I worked with our talent team, and I said, we really need to focus on somebody in Berlin, Germany, that has these relevant security ops experience, 1 to 2 years security operations. And then, so we had to kind of put in some geographic filters and say anybody who's in Italy, Dubai, Singapore, we had to filter some of those out. So I also was working with my talent team to do kind of some of that level 1 filtering. And we eventually found somebody that had several years experience with security operations. And I immediately saw he was in Berlin. So I'm like, okay, that meets several requirements. I'm like, fast track this guy and let's get him through the interview process. So I know it's kind of challenging because maybe we don't fit into those requirements and we have to go through some of those concentric rings of reviews. But I also have an intern that I've recently hired who, just reached out and was like, I'm passionate about security. Like I had a class in university. I learned a little bit about web application security. I want to sign up for, try Hack Me and Cyberary and do some self-study. I'm interested in this and this, and here's what I learned about in university. And just started engaging me and asking for feedback. And I said, let's bring you on as an intern, and we'll start you off with, with kind of an intern level, entry level tasks. And she's starting to help us with project coordination with some of our communications and coordinating with one of my AppSec engineers who has a lot on her plate, helping coordinate with that. So just that initiative and really kind of getting that foot in the door. And I want to go back to the question, make you pull certain applications for the interview. For entry level positions, you definitely want to show, like Corey said, you're able to be adaptable, you're able to think and solve problems. A lot of the problems in security are big problems that are just a series of smaller problems that are kind of all conjoined. So being able to look at that big picture and say, okay, if I look at this all in one thing, it's going to be a little overwhelming. So let's break this down into smaller pieces. If we solve this problem, then it'll be easier for us to move on to this next one. And then if we solve this one, then it's going to get us halfway there to this bigger issue. So you want to show those engineering initiatives, show that you can problem solve, show you have some empathy and you're able to listen and say, okay, I really want to really listen and understand this issue so I can kind of think about it and then start to solution, and build those solutions. So showing that initiative, showing, problem solving skills, the ability to self-study and say, same thing that I did when I was in school. I just went out and got Security Plus certified. I knew it was good to have on my resume. So if you go to a recruiter and you say, hey, I've done this all on my own and I just got my Security Plus, last month or last year, just on my own initiative, that's going to show some initiative. So those are just some tips and things that I think, help me look for keywords and different, different highlights and resumes that I'm pulling.
Yeah, that's a great point. I did too. I got my Sec Plus when I didn't know anything about security. I tell people to this day that was the hardest certification I ever got because I hadn't worked in security. I studied out of a book and got the cert, and I don't remember, probably barely passed. I don't know, but I remember getting my CISP and thinking, man, that Sec Plus was a lot harder than that, and it really wasn't. I didn't know anything at the time, so just the amount of knowledge that you soak up and someone with a Sec Plus, you're going to know a lot of the terminology that maybe someone else has to Google. Maybe they've been in the industry. Like I was saying, that 10, 20 years, nothing's the same now as it was back then. You just got your Security Plus, so you know all the up to date and the current stuff, and that's going to go a long way. Just putting relationship with names and concepts together. You'd be surprised. You get your Sec Plus, the next year you're going to be going, oh, I remember reading that, and it's going to help you understand just a little piece that you didn't or wouldn't have known, and it's going to take you far. So a lot of people will say, hey, I don't value certs. I don't care. I value what you want. To me, someone worked hard to get it, so I'm going to value it. If they put in the time and effort to do it, hey, good for you. If somebody doesn't want to get one, hey, good for them. It's a personal thing. So you're going to find people on both sides of that wall. And I'm just going to tell you, do what you want to do. And if you studied your butt off and you want to put a cert on your resume or on your email signature line, go for it because you earned it. And don't let other people talk you out of doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree, Corey. And I think, I've worked with some folks that, their signature line, it was just like alphabet soup. I mean, there was like 17 certifications and I'm looking at mine and I'm like, okay, I have Security Plus. I don't have my CISSP. And to me, I kind of struggle with it, but really, I mean, it's good. And I went through the same thing. I studied hard. I got the book. I did, flashcards and online trainings to get my Security Plus. And that kind of goes back to the question I asked about, hashing versus encryption. Security Plus will cover, here's encryption algorithms, here's what, what foundationally, what hashing and what encryption it does. So those are topics that you'll learn about in the Security Plus certification. But me personally, once I got my foot in the door and really showed my work ethic, my managers are like, I don't care if you have a certification or not. Like you show up to your meetings, you show up on time, you're excited, you're enthusiastic, people like working with you. I don't care if you don't have all these certifications. Once you have some experience and you're able to build those relationships, show your work ethic and show your hustle. I mean, there's people that I know that have 15 certifications in their resume. Like Corey said, cool, good for you. Like you put a lot of time and you can study and you can pass multiple choice tests. That's cool. It does show that there is knowledge there. Me personally, I've never been a certificate chaser because I'm more interested in putting in work. I work a lot of long hours and I work a lot of projects that I don't want to just have certifications behind my name. Like my work shows for itself. So, just something to think about in the certification space. It's good when you're kind of getting started to show like, okay, I'm able to understand these concepts and know the difference between hashing encryption or IPsec versus a VPN tunnel. Some of the more technical stuff. You have to have some of those foundational things, but ultimately, I worked with a manager who he was very, very sharp. He memorized the whole CISSP book, passed the exam, and then forgot it all. Like the guy could barely even send an email. He was a great manager, but he just he memorized the whole book and just passed it. And it's like, but then it was like some of the he could hardly even send an email. Sometimes I had to troubleshoot Outlook for him. So just having a bunch of certificates behind your name doesn't always mean that you have the hustle and the work ethic. So like, do you show up? Do you put in the work ethic? So just kind of for what it's worth.
Good question.
Yeah.
Application security versus network security. Which one would you guys say is the more important?
I mean, they're both. You're not going to like the answer, but I'm going to tell you, one's not more important than the other. Just different perspectives. So think application security. I mean, if you really break it down, you're just going up and down the OSI level. It's you're protecting at that application layer. Network security, that's the keys to the kingdom, right? If you got some top secret information or domain segmentation. But one, applications, if it's a web app, it's externally facing, it's still challenging. Just different specialties. I'll be honest with you, you don't see a lot of AppSec people that don't go down the developer route. I tell people all the time, I'm an expert pen tester. I do application security. I'm not a developer. I can't tell you how to fix the code. I can tell you where it's wrong and how we broke it, but just different specialties. But one thing I will say, in applications, you deal a lot with middleware. So if you're dealing with like vulnerabilities or pen testing, there's a lot more, let's just say there's a lot more ways to break an application than, just using the network layer right on the network internally. So different challenges there, but I wouldn't say one's more important than the other. I would say that, I don't know, Alex, what do you think? A good application security engineer is pretty hard to come by. Most people are pretty well versed in network security. I'm not saying they're all good, but they all know, a piece of it.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I'm sorry, Joseph. Yeah, thanks for the question, Joseph. I have some opinions on this, and I'll share again. What it's worth. I think that there was a recent event that really highlights the importance of network security, but it's kind of an edge case. I'm sure some of you have seen, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, the entire Facebook platform went down for a day because they had some misconfigurations and their border gateway protocol, which is like large network connectivity to connect data centers to data centers. So that's an example of where like network security, network segmentation, somebody messed up on that GDP or BGP policy. So Facebook's going to go back and do a root cause and try to figure out the root of what happened. So I mean that is an indicator that network security still is very important because all of these devices are all traversing networks at some point. But I will say, and this is part of my background in cloud, and I mean software is eating everything. And I mean, even if we're looking at, when you think of traditional networking in the cloud, we call it SDN. It's software defined networking. So I think AppSec is kind of edging out some of that traditional network hardware, because everything's moving to software. So I would say that while they're both important, looking at the trajectory of where cloud is going, everything is moving to software defined networking, where it's all app, it's all app level. You log into AWS and you have all your routing and all of your CIDR notations, everything in software. So because of the trajectory of cloud, I think that AppSec is probably, there's still need for network security skills, but I think that AppSec, it's all going to be running on software eventually. So that's just my opinion.
That's why I asked that question, is because I actually spoke with other experts, guys who've been in the industry a long time, and they didn't see the importance, or they said that network security was more important. And then I said, okay, well, what's running your network? An app, right?
Yeah.
And like, yeah. So I was like, so how? I mean, I'm not trying to stump you, but I'm trying to wrap my mind around why people are saying certain things are more a staple than others, when it's like nothing will work without the app functioning.
I think a lot of that probably comes from, and those are great points, but so it depends on what camp you are from security, where you came up. I came up on both sides, right? I did vulnerability management, and then I went into pen testing, and then I went into architecture. So it's like I had the whole spectrum, but there's more controls you can put in place on the network layer, right? So compensating controls, it might take you 2 or 3 fixes for an application to clear a vulnerability, or maybe there's some compensating control in the network layer, right? That you can fix, as long as you can control that. And there's more bypass. I mean, again, this chicken or the egg, you can go either way with it, but they're both important, right? It just, there's probably more opportunity for network layer security than app security, just because what Alex was saying with the cloud, the cloud is shared responsibility. So they control that network that you're talking. The network security in the cloud is controlled through Amazon. Now you have to control the configurations and the settings correctly, but the infrastructure itself is maintained by them. So I think that's the part that Alex was talking about, that is starting to slip, to that lesser kind of numbers that have traditionally been in security, where hey, the network security people have pretty much run the security teams because they outnumber everybody, right?
Yeah, and that's, something that's interesting. And like you said, with Amazon, if you sign up for a cloud account, you're never going to go into a data center and rack and stack and run Ethernet cables, and do any fiber networking, and that's something that, I mean, it's fascinating with the cloud, and it's an advantage and there's costs. With the cloud, you essentially can spend like 10 minutes and you're creating an entire data center, an entire IT department. You have identity access management, you have that software defined networking, your network zoning, all of your CIDR notations, all of your app development, identity, all of that is all just in this cool little console. And it's like there's so much stuff in Amazon. So it's fascinating to me in the cloud, where it's all very software. And I've had to talk to some leaders and say, we don't really understand it. I'm like, imagine your entire data center team, your entire IT department, all of your developers, all of your infrastructure teams that are racking and stacking servers. It's all in one little box in Amazon, and you can build an entire data center with a click of a button. So that's where you have to think about that, like the software defined networking, and those network chops are going to apply. I mean, I'm working with my infrastructure team all in the cloud to do network zoning in a production environment, and we're going through the same thing. Okay, let's look at the CIDR notation. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm rusty on my CIDR notation, but I have to apply some network engineering principles in a production cloud environment, where we're looking, okay, here's an API zone, here's a DMZ zone, here's a public or a private, database zone, and then here's kind of a, some other APIs, so that, you can apply those network security principles to both, and then apply the AppSec layers, like Corey said, apply the AppSec layers to the network side. I'm sorry if I'm not really clearly answering your question, because it's just it's tough to say, kind of a chicken versus the egg problem.
Yeah.
There's no really, the only way you would have a definitive answer is if you were dealing with if you were dealing with the defined situation where you were building. And
Mhm.
so that's the thing that I get when I speak to interviewers interviewing me is I ask them, do you guys build? Do you develop? Because if you're developing, I think that to look at software or application security as less of a thing is a very big mistake versus
Yeah.
security.
And that's not even touching on the new, the supply chain security issues that just came with SolarWinds. And, now everyone's throwing in the supply chain risk management, right? And the government, that's a $3 billion industry next year. And that's everyone wants to get into it. But I mean, people have been doing that forever. A lot of the security guys, the older guys that sit in the back corners have been doing software assurance, for 20 years. And back then, nobody cared. Nobody listened to them because, oh, it's just going to work, right? It's software. Someone else develops it. But now you can't even trust the patches that come in, right? So then you move into zero trust. And I think all of you are going to be in a unique position because, in 5 years from now, you're going to see a completely different industry than you see today because everything's going to be about zero trust. Now everything is based on perimeter security. It's you put all of your protections at the gate. You don't let them in, but once they're in, hey, they're trusted. Now everyone's going to zero trust, which is completely different. And it's easy transition in the cloud, but it's not easy on prem, especially with legacy applications. But once they get that part figured out, I mean, you guys are going to have plenty of job security because cloud speeds up data. And Alex, I'm sure can tell you, the faster data gets, the harder it is to detect those vulnerabilities and those security events. But also, when you go to zero trust, now you're monitoring your alerts and your alarms are just getting quadrupled, maybe 10 times the alerts and alarms. And it's going to be, if I have any advice for anybody, if I was sitting in your spot and I wanted to go back and talk to myself today, I would say learn zero trust and learn cloud because it's cloud is kind of where everything's going to go, and zero trust is going to be, in my opinion, once they go to the cloud, they're going to make both transitions. So those are, I think, two. You get good at identity access management in the cloud, you're going to have the best of both worlds.
I have a question. It's kind of a basic question, but um, I have large gaps in my resume because I was on disability for a long time. I still am. How do I show that? Like you mentioned, that hustle, that drive. When you have that 10-year gap or more of what you were doing, so
I think most of the time, honestly, when it comes up, it's more of just a curiosity, like, hey, what was going on here? I interviewed a guy, probably 3, 4 weeks ago, and he had a 10-year block, and him and his wife, they had kids, and his wife made more money than him, so they had to make a decision on who was going to stay home, and it was him. And so yeah, it's like I seen a 10-year block, and hey, what were you doing during this 10 years? And he told me, great. I mean, it wasn't a bad thing at all. I think if anything, it's just going to be calling it out and just explaining it. But I don't think it would be much of a challenge at all to overcome. And to be honest, if it is, you probably don't want to work there anyway, right? I think, just always just be honest and upfront. And it's never been an issue for me, but I can't really speak for everybody, but I think you'd be okay.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Sam. Yeah, and I think similar to what Corey said, transparency and honesty, are definitely important if a recruiter or, hiring manager has some questions. And I think the more important thing is, okay, obviously be upfront and say, this is a disability, this was something that, that you had to handle. But when you're coming out of that, they're going to say, okay, well, security changes very rapidly, like every day. I mean, I tell friends and family that are like, what's going on in security? We see it in the news, and I say, I go to sleep and I wake up tomorrow and it's like we have a whole new world of new security challenges because when I'm asleep, everybody in Asia, Russia, Eastern Europe, they're all busy all night, when we're sleeping, and every day is a new day. So I think that the important thing, Sam, and I want to try to answer your question is, be transparent about it. And then also say, so what I've done, since then to make sure that I'm up on technology, I've done some self-study of, listening to a podcast and following a podcast from, this ethical hacker or this security researcher, I signed up for Cybrary, or, did a capture the flag exercise with CyberUp. So, you want to be able to show that, while maybe you had a gap in your resume, that you can keep your skills current, because security is just changing so fast. So I think that would be the most important thing, is be transparent and upfront, and then say, so over the last couple of months, I've been refreshing my tech skills and getting up to speed on, OWASP top 10. OWASP just released their top 10 for 2021. And the last version was 2017. So it's been about 3 years since OWASP has done a major release. So everybody go out and read OWASP top 10. That'll be an interview question. Like, what do you know about OWASP? And I'll put that in the chat here. OWASP top 10. So yeah, Sam, I would say, just spend some time to refresh your skills and make sure that you're saying, hey, I'm transparent, with you about this gap in the resume, but here's what I'm doing to stay up to speed on current events and recent events in the security world. Does that help answer your question, Sam?
Yes. My gap was mainly like I did a lot of retail and stuff like that, and adjacently helped people with tech, and they just came to me for questions. But the idea of like listening to podcasts and checking websites, I do that when I can, so which is often. But would you recommend some, like, apart from the OWSAP, and other ones, like any ones you can recommend to just keep, that are always like keeping ahead of the thing curve?
Yeah, I'll put a couple other tools in the chat here. One tool that I use, and of course, I think Cybrary may have some resources available as well. I use a tool called Cybrary, CYBRARY.IT, and they have it's a free platform, so you can sign up for free and go through their courses. And then two other tools that I'm used a little bit. One is called Hack the Box. And if you're more interested in like the offensive pen testing side, more on the AppSec side, Hack the Box is a tool, and then Try Hack Me is another site. And they essentially, you just log in on a browser and you can do like hands-on pen testing just within a browser. So those are a couple free resources you can use on the internet. Sign up and start doing some pen testing and ethical hacking and learning AppSec. You could start tonight if you wanted. So Hack the Box and Try Hack Me. So
Thank you.
I just put those in the chat. Yeah, I mean, if you want to just check them out, it might be, like I said, free resources on the web you can sign up for and start doing some self-study. Okay, anybody else have any questions? I know it looks like, let's see, Crystal, let's see, you said both answers were helpful. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask us, Crystal? Oh, I think you're muted. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I know sometimes I have audio issues with WebEx. Yeah, and if your audio is not coming up, I mean, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll try to answer it. How about anybody else? Let's see, Ori or Nick or Elva, do you guys have any questions or any other topics you'd like us to cover?
Yes, I had a question that I posted, but I'll ask it. There are many entry-level positions requiring 2 to 4 years of experience. And I always wonder why that's considered entry level, where in other places that might be like intermediate. So does your company require that many years of experience for entry level positions?
I'd say it depends. I mean, I'll be honest, and I hate that too, right? But there's some contracts that may say, hey, the client's going to say we need somebody with 2 years of Splunk experience, right? So you call it an entry level position because maybe it's an engineer spot. And if you call it a mid-level engineer, you got to pay them a lot more money. A lot of times it's just a play on wording. But another thing to remember, those are just suggestions, right? So it's I've interviewed plenty of people that have 2 to 4 years on something, but interview another guy that has been at home just setting up home network labs and got his own Splunk demo set up and was a lot more versed on the tool than people that have done it for a long time. So it never hurts to throw your hat in the ringer, but depends. TA writes a lot of those, talent acquisition. Me, if I'm writing the job rec, sometimes you'll copy and paste from other things and maybe it just got left in there. But yeah, I'm with you. A lot of times it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, and I can add to that. I mean, I know at least, my specific roles that I work on, I coach my talent team on, and write most of my own job descriptions, for that very reason. And I think that it's a misconception with talent acquisition. And I mean, if you follow some security people, if you're on LinkedIn, it's almost hilarious. I mean, I've seen people say, we want 12 years experience in Kubernetes. And then it's like Kubernetes was invented 4 years ago, so who's looking for 12 years experience for something that's only existed for, for 4 or 5 years. So that's a lot of a misconception, with talent acquisition teams. But, Elva, I would say if you find a role that you think looks good and you're interested, go ahead and apply. A lot of times those requirements of, 1 to 2 years for entry level, a lot of, and I had to kind of go back and revise a job description that I recently worked on. I wrote a job description for one of my key security engineers who took a promotion and moved on. And I wrote the job description, and then I had another security expert look at it, and he was like, dude, you're looking for the unicorn. Like, this person doesn't exist because, we were doing so much of so many different things. He was like, you got to kind of cut some of this down and say, we're looking for really key areas, must have, and then maybe some nice to haves. You can't have somebody that is an expert in Cloudflare and Sumo Logic and CrowdStrike and 7 other tools, and I want to make sure I'm answering your question. So if you find a role that you like, go ahead and apply. A lot of times those requirements are a wish list, like, hey, we really love people, but it is a misconception where I agree. I think entry level, if it's an entry level role, it should be, 0 to 6 months experience. Maybe you interned in a security role, or maybe you were working in IT and we're supporting, security as a stakeholder, doing identity access management or doing, help desk tickets and things like that. You can say, I mean, it doesn't say security person in my job, but I was working with security stakeholders. So I want to try to answer your question. So, just go ahead and try to apply. A lot of times it's like the dream. Like, we would love to have somebody that has, 2 years experience, but in reality, the candidates and talent people have to recognize that if it's a true entry level position, you're not going to have somebody with 2 or 3 years experience, because in security, and I mean, and me personally, and I hate to, I don't want to make this about me, but I was hired as a junior analyst and within 9 months promoted to a middle level analyst because I worked my butt off. And my manager was like, you took on this. Like, these are all crucial areas. So we're going to make you a middle level analyst, within 9 months. That was just based on my work ethic and hustle. And then the next position that I took was a senior position. So I was able to move from a junior to a senior level in 2-3 years just from working really hard. So don't get discouraged if you see, 2 years experience for entry level. Put your resume out there and say, hey, I want to put my name out there. Maybe I don't have 2 years, but a lot of times that's like, recruiters are looking for, like, we're wishing for the best. We're wishing for that unicorn. But you want to keep trying, and these recruiting teams in particular have to be better with these expectations and saying entry level with 2 or 3 years experience, that's a mid or senior level. And from my experience. So, does that answer your question? Does that help, Elva?
Yes, it does answer my question. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely apply, because I can't tell you how many times someone would interview for a position and right person, just wrong seat. So it's like, you're not right for that position, but man, you'd be great for this other position that I do have. And you'll see that a lot. So it never hurts to throw your hat in. Plus, remember, sometimes it might be an internal thing. So if you have internal applicants, it's got to be released first, in some companies, to internally. and then it can go to external applicants. So maybe it was an internal thing where it had to be someone internally that had been there for 1 to 2 years. I've caught that a few times with us, but yeah, don't ever be, I mean, always apply, and don't ever let, requirements discourage you. The worst they can say is no, right?
Cool. All right. So we do have a message from Ori in the chat here. Are coding skills important in security? Which languages would be most beneficial to learn or know the basics of? I'm not a developer. I suck at development. I can hack some stuff together in Python. I could probably put together an HTML page that would probably look terrible. I've never been a developer. I mean, I can follow code and read through, frameworks and languages. But if you said, hey, here's 10,000 lines of code, go find the bug, I'm going to be like, probably not. So in my day to day, I mean, I'm doing security architecture, governance, working with security leadership, working with pen testers. I don't have those hands-on skills, but here's my caveat. I would probably be better at my job if I could script and do some automation and, script and automate some of the tools that I'm using. I have an AppSec engineer who was a developer, QA tester. She's phenomenal with AppSec and product security. So having that foundation is really good in the AppSec space. And it's something that I've just never been really good at coding. Like I said, I mean, I can hack something together in Python. I wish that I had some scripting skills that I could just like script away, maybe write a script that replies to all my emails that I don't want to, respond to. That would be cool. So I would say yes. I mean, coding skills are important and they help, they help people in the field. I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker. Like I said, I don't code day to day, but I would be a better security person, if I could script some of my tools that I'm using. And then the coding languages, I think that Python, Python for scripting is probably a good foundation. Like I said, I can do a little bit of Python, a little bit of shell work. Java's big, in the company where I worked, our whole front end is JavaScript and React. Our back end is Kotlin and Ruby on Rails. So, if you're looking at either front end or back end, Java is going to be huge for front end. So I would definitely say, Python, Java are a couple languages that you could start with. Corey, what's your experience on that?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I never have been a developer. I'm too much of a perfectionist, man. I would take lines of code and try and get it down to one line, and all of a sudden it's like the law of diminishing returns. I've spent 3 hours doing something that I was trying to save myself time on. But yeah, what is it? 30 days or PowerShell for 30 days of lunches. That's a good one. PowerShell, if you work with Windows at all, that's always good just for the automation piece. Yeah, just know the structure, right, of Python. JavaScript, same thing. You kind of want to know what you're looking for. You don't need to be on a level where you're writing stuff, at least in my opinion. But there are times as you get into threat hunting, things like that, where it could benefit you by knowing it. But again, it's not something you can't Google either. It's a team, so you're going to have people that are strong in it. But I would definitely get familiar with at least PowerShell, because that's just going to help you automate stuff.
Yeah, and I can add to that. In my current role, I have several people on my team, more background in incident response, cloud security, doing SOC operations, security operations, and we all kind of recognize like we all suck as developers. So I'm creating a specific AppSec role. We're going to hire an AppSec engineer, and the person that I hired is on my team in Berlin. And she started in development. She was a QA tester for a few years, and then evolved that QA into DevSecOps. Like she basically built a large DevSecOps organization and program. And I'm like, I need that because I don't have that. So we need to bring in an expert, that can do all that work. And this person on my team has been a phenomenal person. I mean, she gets kudos every day from my coworkers, from my leadership. She's gone through and done a very detailed threat assessment of our product. The first time our threat assessment was really done, we're building our DevSecOps pipelines. We're building threat modeling program. We're training engineers on threat modeling, and looking at abuse cases versus use cases. Thinking like an attacker, like doing threat modeling. And, that code level application expertise was something that my leader, we were like, okay, we've done incident response, we've done compliance, we've done, operations, but we're not developers. So that's where we're like, let's create a role and try to find that person with that background. So just wanted to share that, where somebody that really has that very specific DevSecOps skill set, they're hard to find. So when you find somebody with that skill set, I'm like, let's bring them on board. And her project and plate has gotten very full. We have a lot of work for her to do. So I hope that give you some background on the AppSec and the coding skills. Thanks for the question, Ori.
Can I ask a question to Ori?
Sure, yeah.
All right. Exactly how are you looking to apply the coding skills that you do have? Because concerning network security, if you understand how the data is being transferred as far as it being in an object, then most data is transferred over the internet in a JavaScript object notation. That's called JSON. And if you understand that the data is being transferred in that format, I would suggest that you focus on JavaScript. And the reason why is because JavaScript has the most open source information about building JSON objects and also breaking them down. And you'd also want to focus on arrays as well.
A lot of your tool integrations too. So if you're doing like a SIM or a SOAR platform, a lot of those front ends are JavaScript. And it's funny because I said this the other day to one of our owners. I'm like, well, everyone knows, Python. And, he's a developer and he's like, what are you talking about? Everyone knows, JavaScript, not Python. And I'm like, well, on the security engineering side, everyone knows Python. Apparently on the development side, everyone knows JavaScript, and it's vice versa, right? So
Yeah, having very very limited experience, I would say it won't take you long because you've already proven that you study, looking at the Sec Plus certification. There's a lot of open source information as far as JavaScript and JavaScript object notation. But that's how even Java, C Sharp, basically every major language, even Python, when they get ready to transfer information over the internet, it's in an object. And that's how, from what we've been studying, that's how these guys are injecting actual files into the network, is they're sending it in as an object. So they're mirroring it or they're masking an object and it's hidden within that object. And so by the network not being able to break that object down, and you having to use a third party like application to further sift through the information, if you learn JavaScript object notation, you'd probably be better at finding that or coming up with a solution to block that if that becomes an issue wherever you work.
Yeah, absolutely. And JSON, like you said, that's a pretty big protocol for APIs. Actually I'm working with my team on some open APIs, and JSON is one of the main ways that we have integrations with our APIs and some of the tools that we integrate with. So yeah, JSON is definitely a foundational thing if you're looking at application security, API security, especially. There's a lot of network traffic that's going over integrations with JSON. So yeah, definitely something to read and do a little bit of research on as well. Thanks, Joseph. Okay, we have some folks that are not on screen share. I don't want to call anybody out in specific. Does anybody else have any other questions or anything? Any topics that you want us to discuss? let's see here. Let me just go back to okay. So yeah, Nick's question on Security Plus. Let me see here. I mean, I think that Security Plus is definitely a good foundational, um, certification, and that's a certification that I got when I was finishing my degree in 2013. I renewed it in, I think, 14 or 15, and then renewed it again in 2019. So Security Plus is really good for, just showing that you have baseline understanding. Um, as Corey mentioned, the CISSP, the CISP is a little bit more advanced. I mean, I think that to get the full certification, you have to have another person that's certified vouch for you, and you have to show that you have several years of work experience. So that might be something to look at in the future. But there's definitely some other, more hands-on, like for pen testing. There's like the certified ethical hacker, which is, some people are not as big of a fan of the CEH, but there is the OSCP, which is the offensive security certified professional. That's more of a hands-on certification that's really good. And as again, there's a lot of domains in security that if you're more focused on, more infrastructure or, server side, you can look at like Linux Plus. I know there's like some Linux security certifications, or so it kind of depends, on what kind of scope and what domain you're looking at getting into. On the AppSec side, there's several more like defensive. I'm trying to remember I think there's a new like software security lifecycle professional or something that's like, do you understand how to like secure software in the lifecycle? So yeah, there's kind of depends on the domains. I would say Security Plus is a good start. Network Plus would be a good one, more for the networking hardware side. I'm not sure. Any other certifications jumping out, Corey, that come to mind?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I wouldn't worry too much about it up front because one, you don't want to be the person with no experience and lots of certs, right? Because that's going to actually turn into a bad thing in some people's eyes. But you guys are in this program. Everyone's going to have like a Sec Plus at the end, right? Or be well on your way to get it. I think, like Alex said, that and you get Sec Plus and Network Plus. I mean, you're going to know the fundamentals to the point to where you're almost not entry level anymore. I mean, you got all the foundational knowledge of security, right? So I wouldn't waste too much time trying to get those right off the bat because I know how it gets. It's like, man, am I going to get a job? Am I going to get a job? What can I do? Just do a lot of those things Alex was saying and don't focus too much on the search. Some of them get expensive, like several $1,000s, depending on what they are. Yeah, just if nothing else, get the knowledge because, I got my CH when I couldn't have hacked into anything because I just studied and passed the test. It meant nothing to me because it was so easy to get. But then I went on to get higher level pen testing certs that really meant something to me. So it's all about the knowledge a lot of times. But I wouldn't stress about thinking you have to get 2 or 3 before you get your first job. They'll come as you need them, and you have to keep those up with continuing education credits, and sometimes that could be a hassle to keep track of. And um, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. And you made me think of a couple extra points. That's like the CEH at the Certified Ethical Hacker. I mean, it's like you understand concepts of ethical hacking. What is a SQL injection versus a cross-site scripting or cross-site request forgery? Those concepts you can study, you can learn, pass multiple choice. But I mean, I work with pen testers every day, and being able to say, okay, the concept, now you actually have to deliver a pen test. That's quite a bit different. Having that hands-on knowledge, being able to use Burp Suite and Kali Linux tools for ethical hacking. But I did think of one other quick thing just to go back to your question, Ken. So, or I'm sorry, Nick. I would recommend, if you are looking for an additional certification, maybe look at like AWS or Azure. The cloud providers are now doing like AWS basic security. Like if you can get a AWS certification that shows I can get into an AWS account, I can build a server, I can configure some identity access management policies, do some software networking, build a server, and have it in a zone. I think the cloud security is a huge, again, cloud is just such a huge growth area. So I would recommend looking at like AWS or Azure, maybe GCP, because they also have some resources specifically for cloud security. I know a gentleman who he's like a wizard. He just does, I don't know how he gets any work done because it's like every day he has a new certification. But he recently posted like some AWS security certifications that he did. And it's like to be able to show I can log into a cloud account and do some security configuration hands-on. That would be a differentiator, I would think. So maybe look into some of the cloud security certifications as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and Crystal, CYSA plus, that's a good one too. That's a lot of like if you want to work in security operations or do any kind of analyzation of threat hunting, things like that. It's probably a little better for an analyst type person with a Sec Plus goal. But I'd say it's pretty hand in hand. But I mean, that's definitely a good one. If we're hiring SOC analysts, that's one of the ones that we would look for. And it can come in lieu of experience too, right? So it says 2 years experience, but you got your CYSA plus and Sec plus. A lot of times, in your head when you're going through those applications, when you ask what's going to draw them out, well, a lot of times, that's going to account for something. They can account for experience and knowledge.
Yeah, no, I apologize. CYSA plus. I haven't seen that one yet. That's a new one. I'll have to Google. Is that like a certified?
It's a security analyst plus, so it's like
Okay.
for I said a lot of the SOC analysts. It's a new one from CompTIA.
Oh, from CompTIA. Okay, cool. I can't keep up with all the acronyms and certifications. I'll have to look one up. So I'm glad you had a little experience with that one. Okay, well, I think we still have another 20, 30 minutes or so. I think we're booked until 8:30. So, we'll continue to open up the floor with any questions. Anybody have any interview experience or questions, or anybody applying to jobs? Are you starting to get your foot in the door and getting calls back, or what's the market looking like for you guys?
Yeah, we usually get at least one or two salary questions in an introductory session. I'm surprised no one's asked that yet.
Yeah, let's talk salary.
Oh, so everyone always wants to know what's the entry level? What can you expect to make in security? And again, you're not gonna like the answer. It's all over the place. I mean, some people start at 50, some people start at 70, some people might start at 100. You go to AWS, you might start at 120, but again, it goes back to what's the average rate in St. Louis before the virtual positions. Depending, you'd probably be anywhere between 45 and 70, depending on education, certs, maybe prior experience. Now with the virtual settings kind of opening things up, DC tends to pay a lot more. LA, San Francisco, the Bay Area, those all pay a little bit better. But for me personally, when I got into cyber, I took probably the least paying position just because I'm glad I did looking back now, because it gave me the most experience. And it's not always what the job that you're getting now that you're getting paid for. It's the one that you're going to do, right? So when they're looking at salaries, a lot of times if it comes down between 2 or 3 people, some companies will look at that bottom line when it comes to the expenses. I try to be as transparent up front. Hey, this is what the position pays. You'd be surprised how many people undercut themselves and say, oh, let's say they say I want 40, but the position pays 60. Well, you don't want to be that used car salesman, right? So the position has a salary expectation or a range, right? So anytime you apply, just ask the talent acquisition or whoever the recruiter is, hey, what's the salary range for the position? And if they don't give you a number, and I mean, to me, that would be a red flag, but maybe they have something internally where they can't release it. You can usually find out just by, asking around or at least looking at the experience levels there. But I'd say it's a pretty good career to get into, especially right now. Salaries are higher than typical IT. But it's all about the knowledge gap. So they're going to pay you. I see people that are like SOAR engineers for one. 2 years ago, that was a 5 years experience as a SOAR engineer, or an orchestration engineer. You're making 80 grand. Now, I mean, it's like 200 plus just for maybe a year or two of security orchestration experience because there's a skills gap. Now, in a year from now, when everyone catches on to that and everyone starts learning the SOAR platforms, it'll go back down. But it's just kind of one of those things to watch for. But if as a general rule, what I would tell somebody is, anyway, it could be anywhere between, I would say, probably 50 and 70 starting out, depending on what you're doing. Could be less, could be more. Depends on where you want to work. And remember, not the grass isn't always greener, because there's some security positions you probably don't want or aren't going to be a good fit for your schedule.
Yeah, definitely, Corey. I think there's some market demands. I think that as all of you continue to build your skills and build your experience, build your resume and network, you'll have more opportunities. But I know that me firsthand, having been applying to jobs, going through applications, and also being a hiring manager and dealing with people on my team want more money and may have moved on and taken a lot more money somewhere else. And then also, dealing with the constraints of ranges, ranges that are set usually in HR policies and kind of company policies. There's been a lot of upward trajectory. And, as Corey was saying, I recently hired a security operations engineer, a staff level engineer, that we wanted some seniority. We didn't want to have more of a junior level. We needed somebody who could, take ownership of some of our incident response, security operations tools. And the person that I hired is actually currently managing a SOC team that's outsourced, and he has a team of about 10 people that he's like the team lead for. That's a pretty hard skill set, to find. And I went back and forth with my leadership and my talent team, because we were looking at ranges in Berlin and then ranges versus the US. And I'm like, we need to up our range, because if we're trying to hire somebody that has 3 or 4 years experience, specifically with security operations, what we need in the US, it's going to be a lot more expensive. In Berlin, we know, that the market is a little bit different in Berlin, but even in Europe, the competition is aggressive. So we had to, I had to go back to my team and say, I need a little bit higher of a range so I can get this person that I really need, because unfortunately I don't have the luxury of having a team of 10 or 15 people to say, if we don't find the right person for 6 months, we'll be okay. Like, I need this person in July, like 3 months ago. So I can't wait 6 months to find the right person. If we find the right person, I want to be able to make sure that the salary range, they're happy with that, and they're saying, hey, I'm comfortable, to jump in and start on day one. So there's definitely, there's some market forces, but I think overall the trajectory is moving up, and from my experience over the last 7-8 years, every year, if I've changed jobs, if I've taken a promotion, taken on more responsibility, I've seen, an increase in my salary, and that's been good. And that, is also an indicator of the hustle, and the hard work that we put in. So overall, it's pretty wide. I've seen, people change jobs and take, they were at X amount, salary, and they took an offer that was $40,000 more, and they said, okay, I had a review and I got a merit increase, from my year review that was, 5 or 10%. And then I got an offer from someone else that was like, 30,000 euros or $40,000 more. If you're able to put in that hard work and put in the hustle and really build that network, you'll start to have the opportunities, to move up. So like I said, I started, my junior level position that I started at Hudson's Bay Company. I mean, I was at like 45K, for a junior level compliance and security analyst, and then moved up to a middle level and then to a senior level, moved up to an associate director level, and have been able to progress through that career path. And so there is light at the end of the tunnel. Once you get established and you really start to build those skills and build the network, you'll be able to have options, and you'll be able to hopefully take advantage of those growing salaries and because of the demand. Like Corey mentioned, the unemployment rate is near zero, and security people across the board are hiring. I know I'm hiring for my team. I know, people that I work with formally are hiring. Everybody's hiring. And that's kind of at multiple levels. We need junior level people, and then I need a more senior level person that can coach that junior level person. And then I also need leadership to kind of provide oversight and also, kind of rope in my leadership, so there's multiple levels and just opportunity at several different levels. So I think that it's an exciting time to be in security. And I think overall, as you get established, your security or your salaries will hopefully increase.
Now, with that being said, that transitions into a good topic, and I know we have a few minutes to kill here, Alex, so I hope you don't mind. But I want to talk about the imposter syndrome because that is a career killer for security. And let me explain why. Because you're going to start making decent money. And let's be honest, after 4 or 5 years, you're going to be over 100 grand a year in security. You're going to start feeling like they're paying me a lot of money and I'm not providing the value that I should be. And I see this, I mean, literally with probably 80% of people in those positions. And they just get this confidence lag somewhere in that 3 to 5 year range where they're like, man, I'm an imposter, and they start going down that path. And what I'll say is it's normal. It happens to everybody. There's still days whenever I have that, and it's just normal. So when you experience it, to me, it was awkward because it was like, man, I'm making all this money now, and man, I don't want to lose it, right? But it wasn't like realistic. So I started talking to some other people that had been in the industry a long time, and they're like, oh yeah, that's normal. It's just something a lot of people don't talk about. So anytime I do one of these discussions with people just starting out, I like to point that out because it's something that you probably will have to deal with at some point in your career. And again, it's normal. As long as you keep learning and you're never done with your certs or with your education as far as cyber goes, because you always got to keep it up. But as long as you stay up with things, you go to work and you give 100%, they're going to ask you to give 150, 200%. It's going to be common, especially in security operations teams. But at the end of the day, all you can give is 100%. And as long as you go in and do that and you keep learning and do your best, I mean, it's just get through that. And maybe you're in a position where you won't go through that, and hopefully you won't. But if you do, just, kind of remember these words that it's normal, and, don't let it discourage you because I've seen people just up and quit and leave the IT field in general because of that imposter syndrome. And I don't know. It's kind of a phenomenon to me. I don't know why it happens, but it does.
Yeah, Corey, that's interesting, and and I mean, I can share, my experience when I took a position at Cognizant. I was a senior engineer, team lead, and I was applying to move to an architect level position, associate director. So, you know, jumping a couple levels, and I kind of had that, like Corey said, it was imposter syndrome, um, and I was more concerned about, okay, the expectations for an architect and associate director. Am I going to be able to do this? Am I confident? Am I confident in my abilities? And that's something I talked with my senior director who hired me. I said, this is a big jump. Moving to an architect. I've been a team lead. I've been doing all this work. Um, and my senior director, he was like, dude, I want to hire you for this position because, your interviews are great. You articulate, you answered my questions. You showed empathy. You showed you're willing to learn. Um, you're going to be fine, and I was a little unsure of myself saying, okay, moving from a senior engineer to a associate director. And he was like, you'll be great, man. Like you figure it out, So I've experienced that myself, Corey, and I appreciate you bringing that up because it's real, when you have some ambiguity and you're looking at, I want to stretch myself and say, I want to stretch and say, I want to get to this level, but I know it's a little out of my comfort zone. That's how we grow and that's how we improve. So I just wanted to share that background, because I went through that as well when I applied at Cognizant. I was like, I don't know if I'm able to be an associate director. I'm just, a senior engineer. And he was like, you're going to be great, dude. You're going to figure it out. and I had a leadership team that was like, we're going to back you up and support you. And so working through some of that lack of confidence, it happens to everybody, but you want to, understand that, there's some things you don't know, but if you, put in the work ethic and put in the work, you can get there. So I appreciate that. Yeah, the imposter syndrome, it can be real, but not something that's, a deal breaker. You just have to say, okay, I recognize this is a little out of my comfort zone. This is a stretch, but that's how we grow and that's how we improve as people. All right. So let me just get back to Crystal's question. So any particular area to help you get your foot in the door, cloud security, SOC analyst, help desk. So, I mean, I think if you have no security experience, like none, um, definitely look at like help desk, entry level help desk. I have a friend of mine who has a son going to school for security. I helped him, did some coaching with him, and just finished his degree in security. And you know, same thing. He's applying to jobs, and he just got a help desk position, and he's been in this help desk position for I think about 6 months, and they're talking about converting him, and making him a full-time employee through his help desk experience. He's getting experience with IT, getting experience with security, identity access management, and they're saying, "Hey, you've done a good job in help desk. Like we want to convert you over to IT or over to security where you can, apply those skills from help desk." So help desk is definitely, a good area to start. I think, compliance and GRC is another area where you don't have to be able to understand the craziest security issues, like, even working on compliance issues, like, thou shalt have a background check done on employees. That's not really technical. You just have to say, okay, we need to just have a process and just do this thing. So yeah, I mean, help desk, governance, I think, and compliance. You mentioned cloud, if you have some cloud ops experience, some DevOps experience, if you know how to log into Amazon and build a Kubernetes cluster or build a web server and host something in Amazon, we would hire people on my team who know infrastructure and who do cloud infrastructure. So I think cloud definitely is an area that's entry level that you can start working on, and help desk and IT are definitely areas to start, getting your foot in the door with entry level. So Corey, what do you think? Is that anything to add there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's pretty spot on. It's again going back to the unemployment rate and security. I mean, the jobs are going to be out there. You guys are in a very unique position because with Cyber Up, Tony and Bailey, they have a lot of great relationships, especially in the local area. And Centene's a big partner of Cyber Up, and Spear Tip. Those are both really big employers in the area. And then you're going to have another advantage because I mean, there's certain incentives that companies are going to get for taking people from CyberUp, and they're going to pay a portion of that salary, and it's just a really win-win for both organizations. But there's other companies that like ours, Uncommons, like Centene, Spear Tip, just to name a few, Amarin. A lot of companies will go directly to Tony or to CyberUp, Bailey, whoever, and ask, hey, who do you have available? Send me over some applications. So I think everyone, in this program is going to have a lot better of a chance than somebody that's just kind of doing it on their own. But it's again, it's the analyst positions seem to be a lot more available, right? Because especially with the SOC burnout rate that's going on now, most in security, most people start as an analyst and then they want to be an engineer. Then they're an engineer and then they realize, man, I really didn't want to be an engineer. So sometimes they go back to being an analyst, architect. It's just kind of all over the place. But if I had to say one common theme that most people seem to go through is starting as an analyst, especially in the SOC, you're just going to learn so much about detecting threats, vulnerabilities. I like to say a year experience in a SOC is going to be like 2 to 3 years experience, as an engineer. And then if you get on at a company that does consulting, I mean, that's going to be even more because now you're taking not just one company's security issues, you're going from contract to contract to contract, security issue to security issue. Now all of a sudden, you got a 5-to-1 experience ratio. So a lot of people go that route. But yeah, just stay in touch, friend as many people as you can on LinkedIn, and just keep your name out there. And like I said, everyone that's in this meeting now with CyberUp is going to be in a pretty good spot. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about that too much because I think you're going to land on your feet. But it's always it's stressful. It's easy for me to say don't worry about it, right? But I think you should be fine, and reach out to me and Alex and whoever in the industry, because like Alex said, we always know people that are hiring that need people right now. So that's always good to network with people and let them know you're on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I want to let's see. Zabir has a question. What do hiring managers, recruiters try to gauge about the applicant during the first phone interview? Other than trying to understand if the application is going to be a good fit for the company. Great question. And this is something I'm working through, on several angles with my teams as well. And I hate to answer, ambiguously and say like it depends, but it kind of depends, on who. If you're interviewing with somebody who's a recruiter that's more on the talent team, they're likely going to be more like cultural fit. Do you have work ethic? Do you have some hustle? Do you want to show the initiative, show up on time, show up to your meetings? Are you willing to learn and kind of, and even, when you're meeting with a recruiter who doesn't have security experience, they're going to want to see, okay, have I read about your company? Like, what does my company do? Do a little bit of research and say, hey, I'm applying at Cobalt, so I know you guys do pen testing as a service. So I've done some research. I read, this white paper, and I saw that you guys had this, a press release about this or a new product or feature that went live. So usually recruiters that are non-technical, non-security are going to be more cultural. Like, do you have the initiative to just learn a little bit about the company and be able to say, hey, I'm showing up and I've done some homework. I know what your company does. I know your CEO is, John Doe, and you guys had a press release and you just released this big new product. That for a recruiter is going to say, okay, man, this person did some homework and they know a little bit about us. Let's, push them through because they showed some initiative. Now, the inverse of that, I would say, is if it's the hiring manager who's doing screening, you're probably going to have some more technical questions. A hiring manager is going to be like, okay, I'm the one that you would report to. So I know my issues and I know how, if with you as a potential employee and teammate, are you going to add value and help us, resolve some of these issues? Or maybe we have, an area where we're trying to grow and expand. And like I said, we're hiring at multiple levels, junior, senior, mid-level, and we have to kind of do this balance and say, okay, if we bring in a junior person, we want to have some senior people that have some availability to do some coaching and mentoring. So, a hiring manager is going to kind of have more of a vision of what they need. Probably more technical questions, where a technical recruiter is going to be more just like kind of cultural fit. I have worked with a couple recruiters that are pretty savvy in security, and they can talk through OWASP and they can talk through, security work, that they're kind of more the exception. More general talent management, talent acquisition people are going to be like more focused on culture, initiative, showing that you've done some homework, research, about the company. So that's just kind of my response there to Zabir's question. I hope that helps. Corey, did anything to add on recruiters and that phone screening?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's just gauging soft skills, at least for my organization. And recruiters aren't necessarily technical, so they're just like, I think Sam, I think you're saying, used to be in retail. I love seeing people with retail experience, especially in the SOC, because you know how to talk to people, right? So I think they're gauging, is it a client facing position or is it not? I've had people say to me, I don't talk to people. I don't talk on phones. If you want to talk to me, email me or message me, and that's probably not going to work for this position. So a lot of times it's just those soft skills, but I rarely do you see somebody that has a good resume just not make it through that phone screen process just because, I don't know about you, Alex, but the hiring manager is going to be like, hey, what happened with this person? The TA person might say, oh, well, I didn't think they were a good fit. And it's like, well, set them up for an interview anyway. So a lot of times it's just a formality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I in the recent role that I hired for the security operations person, I had to work with our talent team, and I said, we have some very keywords, that we need to look for. We had some people that had applied and there were some resumes that came in. It was like somebody that was doing open source development and development work. So I like use that as an example for our talent team. And I said, unfortunately, this person is probably a good candidate for maybe our development or engineering team, but for this particular role, we have to cut. We don't need a developer for a security operations team. So I had to coach the talent team and say, look for keywords like QRadar, some of the tools, QRadar, Splunk, Sumo Logic, as Corey said, security orchestration, incident response. Like we need to kind of key in on some of these keywords. And this was for a very specific backfill, I had for a person on my team. So we had to coach the talent team to say, okay, we have to do some level of screening. But then we also, like I said, we have a more general, kind of an InfoSec generalist where we're looking for somebody who's done vendor management, vendor security work. That's quite a bit different than security operations, being able to assess vendors and ask vendor security questions. So, I think that, just kind of a parting thought, I mean, at least with those initial screenings, the talent teams are going to be less technical. And then just kind of pivoting into, Zabir's other question, tips on how to navigate the process. It's a lot of these processes may be convoluted, and I know I've been there, where it feels like I put my resume out there a lot and it's maybe not getting hits, not getting a lot of responses. I would say most importantly, don't give up, stay persistent, keep pushing your resume out there, keep networking, keep applying. I think that I don't remember the metrics offhand, but when I was still finishing my degree, and getting into this entry level security role between, Scott Air Force Base, the DoD agencies, all the contractors over here, applying private sector as well. I mean, I probably applied to maybe 500, 500 positions, and just had to keep going and keep going and keep going. And, I understand, it can be frustrating, to feel like you're just your resume landing in a box, but just stay persistent and keep trying, keep pushing. And, a lot of these companies' processes are going to be different. So it's hard for me to say, go do this exactly, because you always kind of have to navigate through different hiring processes. But I would say the most important thing is just don't give up, stay persistent and keep pushing. And that will pay dividends, dividends in the future. So I hope that helps.
Can I add something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably what you want to try also, as opposed to just applying directly with the company, is going with temp agencies, because temp agencies right now are basically they're gleaning the job market to where the companies actually only want to deal with the temp agency more so than with the individual. So you probably want to find like a cybersecurity temp agency or a technical temp agency and go that route, and you'll probably get a much faster result. Might not be better, but it'll at least get you that first little bit of experience that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been in the private sector. I did do a short contract at Express Scripts, but the temp agencies, they're definitely hiring and trying to help fill that talent gap and helping companies. And then I think, each and every one of you, if you're, involved with CyberUp, if you're going through the boot camp and the program with CyberUp, you're already on a path, to move in that direction, where CyberUp has a lot of really good resources. And Tony and I are we chat here and there, and we've talked about some of this workforce development. I have a passion for education as well. I was an adjunct instructor before, when I worked in a recording studio too. So I'd love to teach and to help people learn. And I think that CyberUp, leverage the resources at CyberUp, network with the folks at CyberUp, see if they can help you get in touch with, the partner programs. I think, mentioned Centene and some of the big companies in St. Louis. There's a definite demand, in the field. And it's just exciting to see, people that are moving in that direction and excited and getting interest into the field. Like I said, I need a whole variety and a whole spectrum of people in my security team, people who know vendor, security, people who know AppSec, people who, can deal with executives, people who can, just do basic level coordination, and just look at our tickets and triage things. So there's such a spectrum of demand, in different areas. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I hope that like I said, leverage your network, leverage the Cyber Up team, and really dig into the self-study. Sign up for Cybrary, try Hack Me, and some of those self-study websites, because those will really help you start getting some hands-on experience. And just kind of a parting thought from me. I mean, I know a couple people in security that they don't have a degree, they don't have a certification, but they're smart and they know what they're doing. And these people will run circles around people who have certifications. These are some people that I know that are ethical hackers, and they do consulting. They never went to school, but they know their stuff, so, really dig into that education and that self-study, get some books, sign up for the programs, and go through the boot camps, and really start to, dig in and lean in, and it will pay off for you guys. I really hope. So thank you again.
I agree with that. And I thank you both for your time, for your knowledge. Thank you for letting us pick your brains. Crystal asked a question about, is it harder or easier to get a remote position at entry level? I think it's easier to get a remote position at this time. This is just my opinion, just because of the pandemic that's going on. I just think it's easier to get a remote position in any level, whether it be entry level or in any level. That's just my personal opinion. Just because of the pandemic, I think people are just hiring pretty much just to satisfy whatever needs that they have, just because there's no unemployment, and people just need people, so they're willing to pretty much hire you at whatever level they need, and willing to make a remote just because they need people. That's just my personal opinion. Alex and Corey may feel differently, but people just need people right now. So I think they're willing to make people remote just to get people in the door. But that's just how I feel about it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But I think
Just to answer that question.
one thing to keep in mind though is if you are entry level, ask them some questions. If you're going to be remote and you're new or newer to the field, make sure they can support you, because you don't want to work for a company that's going to throw you into a remote position and then not give you any help or assistance. And you see that a lot. So, again, low unemployment rate, everyone here is going to have some, it's going to be a market to where you can be picky a little bit. So if you take a remote position, just make sure that, one, you're going to work with a manager that knows how to manage remotely, because that can be a challenge. And
Yeah,
two, that
very
they have
much.
the resources to get you the training you need. And there's somebody you can reach out to, because that's important as you grow in the field.
There you go.
Yeah, I agree completely. And most of the companies that I'm working with, and, just from following, some of the news, I mean, I think that remote is going to continue to be big, at least until we can kind of turn the corner a little bit more with the pandemic and get it under control. I've a lot of the big organizations that I'm working with they're saying we're going to continue to have remote policy first. And just like Corey said, that also, I've worked remote for about 4 years now, and there's some days where I'm like, I miss, going into an office. And I actually just went out to St. Louis the other day because I have a salesperson on my team who's in the county, and we met for lunch, and that's the second time I've met somebody from my company. So like Corey said, also, you want to think about, having supportability, and being remote is a little bit challenging sometimes. Having a mentor that you can work with and somebody you can communicate to coach is definitely going to be important as well.
Well, yeah, we have 5 minutes left, but if no one has any additional questions, I will give you all my favorite gift, the gift of time, even though it's only 5 minutes. But I supremely appreciate you two letting us, like I said, pick your brains and giving us so much insight on the industry. This has been a great meetup. Next year, we're going to change the name to actually Mentor Meetup. I think it's just a more appropriate language to use, because you guys are definitely mentors. Can we actually link up with you all on LinkedIn? Can we get your like LinkedIn, so we can bug you
Yeah.
outside of this format? For one. For two, we did record this session just for those who could not make it tonight. I'm gonna go ahead and upload it on YouTube just for later references. And like I said, I just want to thank you all just for participating and giving us insight on just some questions that we just all just wanted to know and just needed to know for the industry. So I just thank you again for, helping me put all this together, and for those who participated and just asking questions that we all wanted to know.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm going to post my LinkedIn profile. But yeah, request connect with me on LinkedIn, and and you're looking for a job, reach out, or if nothing else, if we don't have anything, I'd be glad to put a good word in for you somewhere. But yeah, it's a pleasure speaking with everyone. And if you ever have a question, message me on LinkedIn, whatever. Tony Bailey, whoever would know how to get a hold of me, send me an email. I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, now let me see if I can. I'm gonna chat my my LinkedIn here in the chat as well. So, yeah, thanks again. I appreciate it, and good luck to everyone with your job search, and continue to work hard. And I wish everyone's the best.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everybody who showed up. I appreciate it. Thanks for all the questions. That was a great session.
Great. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks again for the invite. Appreciate it. Have a good night. Bye-bye.